Hello, I'm Tony.
And I'm Kimberly.
And we are
Better Together.
And I think you might be too. Hey, I want to talk to you a little bit about, in fact, let's just discuss the idea of fear and self-preservation. I've been thinking this through, or I think about this. How much of your life, and I'm just going to ask you this question, how many of the decisions and how many of the things that you do on a daily basis would you say are driven by fear?
Ooh, on a daily basis?
Yeah. And the reason I'm saying this is because I think that sometimes we just fall into a regular pattern of doing things out of fear. And how do we know?
So I was going to say, if I'm being completely transparent, that's an overused word these days.
Yeah, it does. It gets us in trouble on here all the time.
I know. Yeah, I would say at least 50%.
Well, how would somebody know? And this is kind of what I've been thinking about. How would I know if fear were dictating my decisions? In other words, don't you need some kind of third-party analysis, or what does that look like? And I think I've come on a key that will help us recognize when we're making decisions that are motivated out of fear.
Oh, so you're going to help me with I'm going to be better at this 50%.
Well,
I could maybe at 75, I don't know.
I think we can, that's the thing. I think sometimes we don't know. What if we functionally define what it looks like to make decisions based on fear? Okay. Let's just say, and we'll just throw this out there, that decisions based on fear are decisions that prioritize self-preservation. Okay. Now I'm going to go scriptural on you for just a moment. It says that fear is basically based on the idea of suffering or punishment. And I think what happens is very often we get fearful because we are considering ourselves so highly, and we want to avoid any type of hurt or pain or discomfort. So self-preservation becomes our number one concern. And I submit that is basically operating in fear.
Okay.
Fear of suffering or fear of judgment.
Yeah, I was going to. Now, if you said if a fear is tied to self-preservation, I used to say, well, I'm okay. I just want to have a house. It doesn't have to be a big house, but I just want a house. Right. But then what if I had to live in a tent? I don't know if I'd want to live in a tent.
But it was a fear of lack of security.
Right.
Yeah.
It's security or comfort. I can't decide because I really like my bed.
Well, a lot of times, when women really struggle with the idea of submitting to a man or the authority of a man, and there's in our culture, man, you say that, and all of a sudden, man, you're horrible. But the Word of God is very, very clear. Wives, submit to your husbands, but I think very often they don't because of fear. Mm-hmm. They're afraid that they'll lose their identity. Okay. That idea of self-preservation kicks in and overcomes because they fear that their husband doesn't have their best interest in mind.
Yeah, I would say that to be the case. I mean, especially, education. I was encouraged, make sure that you get an education, a higher education, because what if I did get married, and what if the guy left me, then where would I be?
And I'm just telling you, so think about that. Even educational decisions, all of those can be based on, hey, what if I'm thrown into this place and I have to take care of myself? And I don't think we realize how often our decisions really are based on self-preservation, which is rooted in fear. Mm-hmm. And I think it's much more prevalent. I think if we're very, very honest, when it comes to loving you, okay. I'll just tell you that's tough for me, because what I'm saying is love is patient, love is kind, love is all of those things that require me to not be selfish. Mm-hmm. So think about that. So it is basically the idea of husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it, destroys or comes right against the idea of self-preservation, because I'm literally laying down my life. Now, you see how those go together.
Okay.
and how biblical relationships can really, really function, because it says, wives, submit to your husbands as unto the Lord. And it says, husbands, love your wives as the Lord loved the church and gave himself for it. So all of a sudden, doing that is an affront to the self-preservation, that selfish nature that we all walk in to begin with. But look how it can work, and think of how freeing it can be if we'll actually allow ourselves by faith to move beyond that fear and entrust ourselves to each other. Think about the vulnerability that is there, but think about the potential, that's there as well. And how detrimental is it when I, out of fear, refuse to really love you and give up myself like the Bible says? All of a sudden, something that you really, really need, well, you're not getting. And why? Because I'm afraid of losing, my identity or control or whatever else it might be.
Well, or you could be fearful of rejection. Like maybe for me,
Right.
I show vulnerability and then I think, well, he's going to reject me. And
that's when it comes to commitment. Think about it. I think, when we talk about a fear of commitment, it's a preservation of self. I don't want to commit because this person might let me down, or this person might not fulfill me. Think about how many decisions are based on fear, even when it comes to jobs and job security.
I was going to say financial decisions.
Yeah,
everything.
financial
It's almost like we'd rather do it ourselves, which is a lie.
So it presents a massive dichotomy in the life of every single person. You can't operate in faith and fear at the same time.
Right.
So you have to pick which dichotomy, which worldview, which perspective you're going to operate in. One tends to progress and change and transformation, and the other one tends to total self-preservation.
And to constantly be thinking of that. Like if you're operating in fear, you're constantly thinking of that, and it can be paralyzing. Whereas if you're operating in faith, you can just trust that and go on.
Yeah, think about this.
Throughout your daily life.
So let's talk about it.
It can be paralyzing.
It can, even with kids. Think about it. What have you heard? What did our parents say? Our parents said, we shouldn't have kids, or we're second guessing having kids because who wants to raise a kid in a world like this?
Oh man, right. Hey, when we got, I think, to baby number 3, it became again.
So
and 3, that's like hardly not a lot.
And there's that legitimate fear because we see the decline of our culture. We see going to hell in a handbag, so to speak, is what that, but every generation has said that. And you can either succumb to that fear and say, all right, well, no kids, or we're done, or and I know that you may say, well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And if you think about it, well, it really doesn't. Because how can we change the world if we don't have representation in the world through reproduction? But anyway, God said, be fruitful and multiply. So by faith, you go, okay, God, I'm going to trust that you know what you're doing. Fear says, hey, self-preservation. We don't want to have to raise kids in this kind of calamity.
Right.
Why? Because it might be an extra burden on us, if we're honest.
Right.
I mean, you say, well, I don't want a kid to have a bad life, so you deny them life. Anyway, I think that being fear-driven is much more prevalent than what we might think. What do you think would help us? And let's just say we're talking to somebody and they're realizing and recognizing through this conversation that, I do make a lot of decisions based on fear. A lot of people are doing their savings and their retirement, and everything they do is based on fear. Fear of who's going to win the next election, or fear of, is my job going to fold, or the company going to fold, or what's the economy going to look like? What is something that concretely that you can think of to give to people if they come to that place where they say, you know what, I'm tired of living, decision to decision based on fear and self-preservation?
What's one thing? I would say stop doing it. You have to make certain provisions.
Right.
But
recognizing it, I think, is the first step.
Yeah.
To doing it. And that's kind of what, what we're talking about here is revelatory, I hope.
Right. Recognizing that you're walking in fear.
Yeah. And then choose choose to walk in faith, not fear of something. I'll just give you a little something for me, and I'm not saying that this is right for everybody, but it has worked very well for me to this point, and who knows what tomorrow holds. But anyway, whenever I feel I never make a decision, or I try never to make a decision based on fear. Okay. When I feel the resistance of fear over something, very often it's an indicator to me that might be a good thing, or there's a reason I need to stop and I need to consider, why am I feeling this way? Is it because of self-preservation? Okay. Is it because I don't know? Because there's a huge fear of the unknown. And I think very often people, especially when I talk in the area of finances and people are talking about becoming self-employed, or, as opposed to, working for a company or a corporation or whatever that might look like, I think that because they've never done it or they're not familiar with it, that fear a lot of times stops them in their tracks. Or like you said, in the context of relationship, that fear of becoming vulnerable or entrusting myself completely and saying, you know what, you and me forever. Right. Or you know what, we're going to step out, and we're not going to fear raising our kids in a way that is counter to this culture. And we're not going to fear dedicating this season of our lives to educate our children, or whatever it might look like. Okay. So I like that. Yeah. So hopefully some of this was helpful. And ask you a question: how prevalent is fear when you're making your choices and living your lives, and even in the context of your relationship? Don't let feelings or fear dictate your game. That's right. Make sense? It does. All right, listen, I want you to take a moment, subscribe, share this with somebody, and analyze. Look at your heart. Look deeply at why you make the decisions that you're making, and make sure you're not making them out of fear or selfish self-preservation. Yeah. All right, God bless you. Look forward to seeing you again real soon right here on Better Together.